Hey, everybody. Welcome to the second hour of the Santita Jackson Show. I just love you guys. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and my morning stars. Hey, everybody, like and share. Please go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and like and subscribe, and share the show, everybody. Please share the show with at least one person, but like it. It helps us algorithmically. That's what we need the help there. There you go. And of course, the Santita Jackson and Friends page. We've got a lot to talk about today, and I want to hear your thoughts about the Republican plan. Oh, yeah, to subvert the election. Senator Bernie Sanders has been calling them out. He said, look, pay attention to Trump, former President Trump. I will refer to him respectfully always. We have to be what we want to what we want others to be, which is respectful. Everybody, let's kind of move in that direction. Not kind of on this show. That is where we're going to be. That's it. That even as we disagree with someone vigorously and rigorously, because boy, oh boy, he just keeps talking, and it just gets worse and worse by the day. But I don't think we should be shocked. We shouldn't be. And nor should you be shocked by this Republican plan to subvert the election. It is a very real plan. And Senator Sanders has said this is what he's doing. He hasn't just installed judges. He is cultivating his supporters. They keep calling it a base. It's not a base. He has a group of supporters. Base implies a small number. That's the nuance of language. He got 75 million votes, y'all. 75 million votes. No second place finisher has ever gotten that many votes in American presidential history. He's got a group of supporters. And many historians say that we could be on the verge of civil war in the United States. And people feel that strongly about their vote and about not even about the candidates, because the candidates are more or less a Rorschach test. You project onto the candidate what you need them to mean for you. Half the time, we don't even know what they stand for. We don't, Attorney Terry O'Neill. You know that. If you ask people to list out their policies, no, people don't remember what you said. They remember, thank you, Dr. Maya Angelou, they remember how you made them feel. And that's politics. That's why so much of this has devolved into a personality contest and not a debate about policy. And policy is what you live on, everybody. So let's talk about this today. Let's talk about this plan, this significant plan to undo the election, to not concede the election. What would that look like? What will all of that mean? I want to know what your thoughts are. I want you to reach out to me here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and let us know what your thoughts are. This is the headline. It's a different level than 2020. Trump's plan to steal the election is taking shape. This is from The Guardian. I mean, and there's so many articles I sent you all, right? There wasn't anything, Sam Levine writes, there wasn't anything particularly controversial about Georgia's presidential primary in March this year. Donald Trump won the Republican contest, picking up a little more than 400,000 more votes than Nikki Haley, who had long dropped out of the race. Nonetheless, two Republicans on the 5-person Fulton County Election Board refused to certify the election. So this is just in Georgia, in one county. Julie Adams and Michael Heekin didn't point to specific irregularities. Instead, they said they needed more information from election administrators, like a chain of custody, documents for ballots. Adams and Heekin were outvoted, but it didn't end there. In May, Adams, who is a part of an election activist network founded by Cleta Mitchell, voted against certifying another Georgia primary election, and on it's going. We are continuing to pay attention to what's happening in Washington. We're not paying attention to what's happening in our states, in our cities, in our towns, in our counties. And the dry run has already happened, Ariel Gold, Fellowship of Reconciliation, their executive director, former national president of the National Organization of Women, Attorney Terry O'Neill. It's happening. And wait a minute, the primary season is behind us. It has already happened. They know how to do this for the fall. Attorney Mark Fancher, National Conference of Black Lawyers. It has already been happening. Let me start with you, Ari Bloom-Katz. In These Times magazine, of course, all of us will be meeting up in Chicago before the Democratic Convention, the 15th through the 18th. At the Rainbow Push Convention, we're going to have Reverend Dr. William Barber, Senator Bernie Sanders, former State Senator Nina Turner, Judge Greg Mathis, Attorney Terry O'Neill, Ariel Gold, Fellowship for Reconciliation, Ari Bloom-Katz in These Times magazine, and on and on and on it is going to go. Ro Khanna's coming in before the Democratic Convention. The Nation magazine, John Nichols and Katrina Vanden Heuvel and that wonderful group who endorsed Reverend in his presidential runs, they are honoring him. They're honoring Reverend Jackson's, they're honoring the 40th anniversary of his presidential run in 1984 and more than 60 years of ministry. But Reverend doesn't want us to stop there, as you well know, Ariel. He is like, that's nice, great, looking back, lovely. We're looking for a path forward. He wants voters to be registered. He wants us to pay attention to the issues because in a time, it should not be lost on any of us. Josh from Detroit, Jews and Allies of Michigan, sending you much love, my dear brother. Ham hocks and locks. Yes, I know it's driving him nuts. That having been said, it's kind of dystopian, Ari Bloom-Katz. The Supreme Court struck down affirmative action in higher education. We are all but eliminating DEI. You're watching some of the biggest trees, women, in this DEI forest, like Claudine Gay, the first Black president of Harvard. Bill Ackman took her out. And he's taking out DEI, not just in corporations, but in universities. This is happening in real time, and yet we're about to have a Black woman be president. Certainly she's a nominee. And I think she is really on track to be president, and let President Trump keep talking and he's going to seal the deal. So don't stop. Just keep on. But Ari Bloom-Katz, help me. Because Senator Sanders has said, look, you better pay attention, everybody. This guy is not benign. He's working and thinking all the time. What about this Republican plan to undo the election? Is it a real thing? Ari?
Well, first off, thanks, Santita, and hi to the other panelists. Great to be with you all this morning. So there's a couple of things on my mind about it. One is it's of course their plan, and it's been the plan of white supremacists for a very long time, for since 15th Amendment and long before, to really limit, restrict, and attack the voting possibilities of particularly Black Americans, but also of Americans of all sorts. Obviously, women, obviously, other disenfranchised folks. So, I think also needs to be seen in the long trajectory of white supremacist attacks on voting rights that have just been accelerated and have metastasized in various ways throughout our history, and then leading up into this current moment as well. We are seeing active rehearsals for denying election results, for potentially stealing an election. We saw rehearsals for it previously during the last election. We are seeing active rehearsals for it, especially in Georgia right now. We've been seeing folks poking and prodding around it, and we've seen a really systematic attempt to take over courts, to take over election officials, and in ways that we're really seeing people who are election deniers from the 2020 election in real positions of power to make calls during the 2024 election. One of the things that's on my mind is in Wisconsin, um, winning the Supreme Court for Democrats was a huge, huge deal. And there were two attempts to turn that court over the years, and recently that victory with Jennifer Sawich is a huge, huge deal. It's such a key swing state, and so I think there's huge questions about what's happening in the key swing states right now. What's happening in Georgia? What's going to happen in Pennsylvania? What's happening in Arizona, in particular? As well around this, but we are seeing active rehearsals right now, especially in Georgia, for how this might work in terms of election denying as we move into 2024. And Santita, on the last hour of the show, when CK Hoffler was talking about Kamala running 100 miles north, full speed ahead right now, and JD Vance and Trump running 100 miles south in this moment, which I thought was so poignant. I think we're going to see a level of desperation from the Trump campaign in which it does not know how to act in this moment, except for do what they do best, which is cheat, which is steal, which is do everything anti-democratic that they can, and that they can move on right now to win in any way possible, even of course if it means not winning. We are seeing, I think, a white supremacist movement that is so anti-democratic that Trump is feeling very comfortable openly parroting anti-democratic and pro-fascist messaging about his election, and that's the game right now, which is let's just get away with any semblance of democracy, and let's do this. And the last thing along the lines of it is, I think there's 5 million, maybe more voters who are disenfranchised right now because of laws that are on the books. Many in key swing states like Wisconsin, like Florida, who cannot vote due to felony convictions or other convictions as well. So I really do think this also needs to be seen in a arc of attacks on voters and on democracy that is really reaching a apex right now. Well,
In These Times magazine, everybody. In These Times magazine, you need to become a subscriber. You need to support them as they support us. Well, as you saw in the chat, Ari was surprised to see you, Ariel Gold. Pleasantly surprised. I just love it.
Old, old friends and
Holy cow! Let's just say he put it that way.
old movement rabble rousers, I will say.
Oh my gosh! I got you all this morning. I'm like, whoa! I don't have a paradigm breaker. All of you are, so I just you make my life easy. Let me sit back, find out. But what are your thoughts about this? I mean, because Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders, is sounding the alarm like Jim Zogby sounded the alarm on the Squad. Some months ago, he said, "Look, you guys, while we're looking at Gaza, if we don't look at what's happening with the Squad," by name, he said, "we could lose Jamal, we could lose Corey." Thankfully, congratulations to you, Ilhan Omar. She pushed back. In fact, she had a more convincing win this time than she did 2 years ago. She won by 2 percentage points 2 years ago. This time she won even more. She won convincingly. And I think people are waking up to what's going on. But that having been said, she is the congresswoman from this home station. And so we send her congratulations and wow, just standing up. We thank you for that. But Ariel Gold, in the meantime, while we've got the push against progressives, there is a groundswell. And you see what happened in Georgia. It's the little things. I mean, we keep looking at what the congresspersons are doing in both houses and what's happening in the executive branch. These people at the county level, at the local level, they're the ones who are unplugging this election. Ariel, they're unplugging it. They just did it in Georgia. It's as simple as I don't have to certify it. So, I mean, what does this say to you about what we're looking at coming into the fall?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've been watching over the past years has been the far right, the neo-fascist movement, uh, employ, or maybe have learned from, but employ some of the tactics that we on the left have been using for many decades. And there's some of the protest tactics, and we've seen the neo-fascist movement really become take the mantle of free speech in their definition of it, and anti-war in many ways as well. And so I think that they've taken with that a feeling of defiance that perhaps anti-imperialist left we've spoken about, but they've turned it in a different way to also be anti-democratic, right? Which is a different element of it. We've long on the left used as part of our protests defiance, right? Non-participation in a system that is broken, and that's very much what active civil disobedience is, right? Refusing to be complicit in an unjust system. And so they have, in a way, taken and twisted that. And I would say similar to the ways that we have seen white nationalism or Jewish supremacy or Hindu nationalism, Christian nationalism twist beliefs in faith and God for hateful and fascist purposes. And so we have to really define our movement in this moment to recognize that we are defiant. We refuse to participate in injustice. And that means being part of democracy. And that means showing up to vote in elections where we may have two bad choices, but we have to ground ourselves the in the movements for democracy and anti-imperialism at the same time, and not allow those struggles of ours to be co-opted. And that includes the struggle for Palestinian rights. And I know Ari follows this as well as I do. There have been infiltrations from neo-Nazi movements into the movement for Palestinian rights. They see it as an opportunity. It's not out of any deep concern for Jews. In fact, it's part of and includes their anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. But they've seen an opportunity to gain more followers on social media and to use the momentum to feign support for Palestinian rights. But we need to be really clear. So we need to be really clear that our work for Palestinian human rights, our work for democracy is universal. It has moral consistency. It is for the liberation of all of us. And so we have to be really, this is a call for us, I would say, to be really mindful of our framing.
So, I mean, what say you, Terry O'Neill, Attorney Terry O'Neill? I mean, because it's interesting. You've been in Washington. I mean, certainly in the past, within the past 10 years, you've been in Washington, D.C. You've been in Oregon, and now you're in Tennessee.
Right. Yeah.
No, I mean, but no, because, America, there are a lot of strings on this guitar, or should I say in this piano. Really, and you see every America manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Everybody, that's why it's important to travel and to talk to people and hear what their experiences are, because they're all legit. I just don't have. I might not agree with your view, but you live 24 hours in a day just like I do, Terry. So I want to know, okay, why are you clinging to that Confederate flag?
Right.
I don't want to. I'm not gonna bless you out. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time with you because I don't know what's coming behind that. Right? I mean, it's a little frightening. That having been said, if I get the opportunity to talk with you, I'm going to do that. I mean, we were riding down the street with my father, with Reverend Jackson in the car on more than one occasion, but this one, Mark Fancher stands out. We were south, not that you don't have Confederate flags in the north, because you do. And a gentleman was on the side of the road waving his Confederate flag. My father said, "Stop the car. I want to speak to him." And of course, you had a couple of cars, several other cars with us, because people form these ad hoc security teams for him. My father is not afraid of anything. And so they said, "Well, Reverend, I don't know if we said no, stop the car." He got out, and of course, he gave this poor man the fright of his life. He was like, "Oh my God, Jesse Jackson, what?" And my father said, "I didn't come to fight. Just want to talk to you. You know, about you and the flag. Because when people don't know Reverend, don't know he's one of the friendliest, most open people you'll ever meet. Doesn't know how to hold a grudge. And this man, he said, "Reverend, I'm going to think about what you told me today." He said, "Hey, my brother, that's all I asked for." He said, "Well, can I ask you just one more thing?" "Sure. Could we take a picture?" He said, "Absolutely." I mean, we have to reach out in that way because I think that if the trends hold, Kamala Harris will win, and I don't want to have the fight for 4 years that we've had this time, because I think it would be even uglier, because people are just not in good places, Terry. And I don't know. I don't think we're paying attention to the little things that are happening that can unplug this election.
Yeah, Santita, I think there's a real problem with us not paying attention to what's happening at the state level, at the county election board level. You're absolutely right. I mean, I will tell you that the shenanigans going on here in Tennessee, where it doesn't really matter because it's such a deep red state. And there's in a suburban county outside of Nashville, there's a group that calls itself Constitutional Republicans who are trying to literally shut down the entire operation of the county's election board. I think the state election commission it makes the rules for the county election boards, and the election board has the Constitutional Republicans have come in and are trying to simply shut down the operation of the county election board. That, by the way, is in line with what is going on in Tennessee, in the sense that Tennessee is not a democratic state, right? There's a number of fascist elements of the way the government works here. But one of the most striking things to me is the exceptionally low turnout throughout the state in voting. So when Tennessee's Republicans came in 2010 to start taking over the state and really making the state a firm, deep red state, Democrats cannot get any power. There's a supermajority in the legislature of very right-wing Republicans right now. There's a right-wing Republican governor, Bill Lee. One of their main tactics is to discourage people from voting. So you put high barriers in front of African American communities, young voters, low-income voters, and so forth. And then also you just make it futile. I mean, why would Democrats come out and vote at all if they just know that that they can't? Their candidate is simply not going to win. Most recently, they redistricted Nashville for the congressional districts, making 1/3 of Nashville is now in a deeply rural district. Another third is in a second deeply rural district, and the final third is in another deeply rural district. All three of those districts now are represented by Republicans. So there is no Democratic representative from the city of Nashville.
Well, hold on, and that redistricting happened in the state capitol, yes?
Yes, and recently, like 2 or 3 years ago.
I'm trying to make the point that we miss how much power rests with the states, right?
Exactly. Now, So what I'm saying is Tennessee is kind of the poster child for what the Republicans want to do in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, and other states. The idea is not only to take over, but then to suppress the vote widely in a number of ways, so that only the proper people are making decisions for this, from the state level and the local level as well. The proper people in Tennessee certainly means white, male, Christian, cisgender, and heterosexual. So this is what we're looking at. And I don't want to bore your listeners with one little state, but I do think it's emblematic of what is the program. That said, I will tell you that Georgia is very close to Tennessee geographically, and I am planning myself to go into Georgia to do some voter protection work. There was a call for, there was a women lawyers call a few days ago, a Zoom call, and a friend of mine sent me a link to it and said, you should check this out. They are doing some wonderful work. This was the brainchild of a woman lawyer in Dallas, Texas, who said, we've really got to do something about what's going on in voter protection in all of these states. So I'm probably going to be traveling into Georgia to look at some voter protection, because right now Georgia is not like Tennessee at all. What's happening in Georgia is the Republicans are going county election board by county election board, installing as many election deniers as they can to, as you said, Santita, to stop the certification process. It's completely illegal. It's completely illegal what they're trying to do in Georgia, because there are 3 or 4 different mechanisms for challenging an election in Georgia. You can go to court, you can file a complaint with the election commission that there was voter fraud or that there was some kind of irregularity in the voter process. The certification process is not a venue for complaining about voter fraud or any of these other problems in the election. And yet these election deniers, the Republican Party is installing these election deniers specifically to stop the certification on grounds of, geez, I thought there was some fraud. I don't have any evidence, but I thought maybe there was some fraud, so I'm going to stop the certification. There are criminal penalties in the state of Georgia for people stopping the certification, for election deniers if they happen to get onto the election board and try to not certify. There's criminal penalties for them. So I think my part of the effort that we are mounting in these states is to just gather the evidence, gather facts, do as much, disrupt the effort to stop the certifications as much as we can, but massively gather the evidence that will be necessary to pursue criminals who go in and commit crimes trying to stop the certification.
Well, the reason we're bringing this up today, Attorney Mark Fancher, is because it's happening. And I just don't want us to get caught flat-footed. And Tracy, I hear you. You said we now know why the good people of Charlottesville were carrying Confederate flags. They told us. I see no reason to reach out to them. They are who they are. I shared that story with you about Reverend Jackson. My father's 82, and he grew up in South Carolina. And all of his life, his senator was Strom Thurmond. Everyone in the state knew that he had a black daughter. Everybody. She was my grandmother's age. And that he had this daughter by his teenage maid, and she was a young teenager. Read into that what you will. Black people have had to make accommodations in order to survive, Mark. People don't understand that. Without sacrificing your integrity. And I've been raised to understand that I cannot afford to shut anybody down. And I'm not going to do that. Why? Because who someone is today might not be who they are tomorrow. You know where you've been. You don't know where you're going. You really, really don't. So I hear you, but I disagree with you. And that's you and I have fundamentally different views of life. And certainly my father's view of life, he's seen some things I haven't seen. And Mark, I think you could say that of your parents, of your families, but they've seen things that we've not seen. I cannot imagine being turned down the opportunity to vote, to use the library, to use the public bathroom, to not be able to buy food. I can't even imagine that. That's the world that my parents grew up in, that they had to change. And while you're making these changes, you're working for these people who've put these laws in place. They have power of life and death over your life. They do. So let us not judge them too harshly in the lessons that they've passed on to us so that we could survive. Because that's really what that's been. When I speak with my friends, my Jewish brothers and sisters, who've had grandparents who had to survive the Holocaust. One of my dearest friends in the world, I talk to him just about every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, because he's my boy. We talk about our grandmothers and the edge one grandmother of mine in particular had, and the edge that his grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor, had. He said, only God knows, Santita, what my grandmother had to do to save my grandfather and our family. And I'll leave it there. Because she had to negotiate with these soldiers. So until you're in that position, until you got to live with that Confederate flag in your face, I don't think you should say anything. Mark Fancher, we're watching this stuff happen in real time and no one's saying anything. Lorraine said, you know what, you guys? I am not seeing the corporate media talk about this. And Ari and Josh, it's happening. But they want to focus on former President Trump and his statements instead of the real barrier between not just me voting, but my vote counting. Mark Fancher, what are your thoughts?
Well, let me start by saying that the anecdote about Reverend Jackson and the man with the Confederate flag brought a tear to my eye because I think it gets to what is fundamentally wrong with the approach that the progressives and the left have taken historically in this country. And that is to not recognize the value of love, of empathy, and the fact that we're dealing with human beings. And Reverend Jackson's experience was preceded by one that Dr. King had. He was in a car with Andrew Young as the driver. And the story goes that, that Dr. King, for whatever reason, used to ride around with his arm hanging out of the window of the car. And that they pulled up to an intersection. And as they stopped, a white man approached and put a pistol to Dr. King's head and said, "I'm going to kill you." And Dr. King very calmly turned around and looked at the man and straight in the eyes and said, "My brother, I love you." And the man was so stunned that he dropped the pistol and walked away. What we forget many times is that when we see these people who are part of the MAGA movement, the white supremacist movement, and everything else, too often the reaction is these people are lost causes. These are people who are monsters. These are people who are inherently evil, and they have no potential or possibility for redemption.
Mm.
But when we do that, we ignore documented history that explains why they are like they are. And the fact is that this country from the very beginning was designed and structured in such a way that it was necessary for them to program into the white working class and poor population a sentiment, a conviction of white supremacy. And it was necessary because the country was not established for all white people. It was established for a white elite.
Mm-hmm.
And the white elite understood that if poor white workers recognized that they had shared interests with enslaved Africans and later newly freed Africans who were still struggling, that if they joined forces, that the elite was finished. And so it was necessary to drive a wedge in between those two populations. And they did it at every level, social, economic, and political. And you can even look at the decision in Dred Scott versus Sanford in the 1850s, which communicates in explicit terms the fact that this country was established for white people and that Black people had no prayer, no hope for becoming a part of it. And it goes so far as to say that had the founding fathers contemplated the idea of Black participation in this country or involvement in it, they would not have enjoyed the respect that they enjoyed around the world. So these kinds of messages were internalized by the white population. And poor white people, white workers, who knew that they were being abused and exploited on some level, still recognized that there was a distinction between them and African people, because they recognized that whereas they lived in shacks with dirt floors and were paid pennies a day, that they had something that Black people didn't have. And that is the expectation and the hope of upward mobility. And they clung to that. And they dreamed that if their lives weren't better, then their children's lives would be better. And they began to see that realized to some extent, with the birth, with industrialization and other things that made it possible for white families to live a better life, up through the 1950s. Then they believed in America. And unspoken was the idea that America was there to protect them as white people, and that they would never be on the bottom rung. Historically, when they found themselves on the bottom rung, such as during Reconstruction, they acted out because this was a breaking of the promise. And so they formed the Ku Klux Klan. They started campaigns of lynching and a campaign for redemption of the South for white people until they could stabilize the condition of white workers. And so we're seeing a repeat of that, where their perception is that somehow America is no longer being preserved for white people, that these brown people are coming across the border and taking their jobs. It's a myth and a lie, when in fact corporations are moving their jobs and closing down their industries, eliminating their possibilities. Their opportunities for education and healthcare are gone. The factories that employed their grandfathers and their fathers and them and their hopes that they could employ their sons, those are gone. And they have only people of color to blame for this. I mean, in fact, one of them even made his way into the White House. How did that happen? This is a breaking of the promise of the preservation of privilege and rights for white people. And if you talk to them a little bit, if you scratch the surface a little bit, they will admit that this is what this is all about. And as long as the progressive forces and the left default into this position that these people cannot be talked to, that these people cannot be persuaded, that the only thing that we can do is to use the system and the process and focus on electoral politics and play the game right and overwhelm them there, then they're doomed, because what's going to happen is that they will come onto the football field equipped and ready to play a football game. And on the other side of the field will be a crazed lynch mob who doesn't respect the rules, that doesn't believe that they're playing a game or that they should respect any of the guidelines, because they're desperate, they're crazy, and they're at war. And it is the great failing of the left that it has never understood that these are human beings who are frail, who are ignorant, who are confused, who are misdirected, and who've been exploited by forces who are ultimately culpable and responsible for the condition that we're in. And until we analyze it on that level, until we attack it on that level, we're still going to be fiddling around with these questions about whether election results are going to be certified and whether they're following the rules and things. It's a hopeless game. It's a hopeless thing to do. This is a human dynamic that's at play, and we don't recognize it as such. We just think it's reducible to some sort of a little electoral process and game that people are playing, and which has been set up to keep us misdirected and confused anyway.
Well, as the Nation magazine comes to Chicago to honor Reverend Jackson's campaign, Ariel and Josh and Ari and Attorney O'Neill and Mark Fancher, the mission statement of the campaign was toward a just society and a peaceful world. That was it. And that sounds as impolitic, but guess what? Reverend, the organization that he came from, SCLC, to save the soul of America. And you don't save souls by ignoring people and by vilifying people and disrespecting people. I don't care. As Dr. King said, if I'm the last person in the room espousing nonviolence, I'm going to do it. If I'm the last person here giving former President Trump the respect that he refuses to give others, well, I'm going to do that because that's what I was taught to do. I don't want to become poisoned, Josh, by the poison that is out here. Then I am no better than my opposition, and nothing will get right.
So true. Everything that's said, especially the example about your father and about Martin Luther King Jr., to look at the things that divide us, repeating a bit of what was said, the answer, I feel a little more hopeful about it, because regardless of who is in the White House now or come next January or previously, the answer is to meet each other at a one-on-one level as human beings, respectfully. That is the answer. When I come back to the earlier conversation of what's going on with the election, the first thought that comes to mind is, well, failed coups are usually followed by a successful coup. You know, Hitler had the beer hall putsch. It failed. He went to jail. He wrote Mein Kampf, and they didn't get a majority, but they managed to, win the election in the early 30s. They had the Reichstag and onwards. So we do see some of that sort of history playing out. Now, what is the answer to that? It's twofold. Terry went over part of the answer. She's going to Georgia. She will be there. But when Terry is there, she will not be there with a pitchfork. She will be there with strength and compassion to, as Mark said, meeting people where they're at. And I do think that there's an answer there, because regardless of what happens come next January, we will have to figure out how to live together. And there is a way to do that respectfully. So I am actually more hopeful than most in terms of where we're headed, because what I've noticed is when we do meet each other one-on-one, I think as horrible, and I always come back to as horrible as what's going on in Gaza is, what it has done is it's brought together so many different people that would see things from so many different ways and start to talk to each other as human beings. Mm-hmm. Even, frankly, even the Zionists, there are people, and it hurts so much to have people you love, you respect, disagree with your point of view, but still I haven't disassociated myself from them. Still love them. They're still a part of my life. And that is a microcosm of how to deal with what's going on now. So, thank you everyone for dissecting this and showing that there is a way forward. It's good to be here.
Well, I mean, and I appreciate you. I mean, because at the end of the day, and I'm not going to respond to people who are trying to provoke. This is a healing conversation, everybody. See, when you steal elections, all Americans are hurt. I don't care whether you are Democrat, Republican, you're not affiliated with a party, or you're with yet another party, and they're all legit. We're pointing this out, Ari, because it is happening, Ari, and they are perfecting this process, Ari Bloom-Katz. And Lorraine asked the question, why is the corporate media ignoring this? Ari, you're a journalist for whom I have boundless respect. We're talking about Trump today and the things that he says that are designed to throw everybody off. We're talking about what he's saying, but we're not talking about what he's doing. It's a complete diversion of the election. I mean, help me.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking about here is, when Trump first started running for president, back, a decade ago or so, it is not it's not hyperbolic to say that he, in many ways, the way that mass media capitalized on his xenophobia, on his hate, on his wild and incredibly offensive and just like awful statements, was it saved mass media. Mass media was at this wild moment where things were really, really tanking, and obviously things are still quite bad. But it was in this like real moment. And if you look at the studies, the amount of traffic that mass media, was able to like create like out of this, it's like unthinkable. And I remember this like from newsrooms. We had, discussions and mandates about making sure Trump was in headlines, making sure he was, in the first couple of like paragraphs to get mentioned for SEO and things like that. We are seeing, and I'm seeing it right now with our own traffic at these times, which is not, you know, sensationalistic articles. We're publishing really critical and incredibly, in my opinion, important work right now about the far right, about MAGA, about like what's going on. But we're getting tons of traffic out of each one of these stories. And if you were to imagine how much traffic we could be getting if we were just pumping out Trump stuff, like, and the amount of advertising dollars that like might come in, obviously not to in these times, but to mass media outlets because of all of these eyeballs in like this moment, they are going to just absolutely keep hammering on this moment. And so one thing that I do want to mention about it is that there is also some like really incredible resistance happening right now with independent media. So for the DNC, for example, we are in some real like formation and doing some real teamwork with the Real News Network, with Truth Out, Convergence, and with several other publications as well. We're part of a network that's called MAD, which is Media Against Apartheid and Displacement for this. And we are like really coming together to really what we hope is a strategic narrative intervention at both the DNC as well as continuing through the election, which is if you need places to get really solid independent media, if you need to get like real journalism in this moment and cut through all the bullshit and cut through all the sensationalism, here's like places like for like folks to go to get like some of that critical information. We'll be releasing a daily newsletter during the DNC for folks so that people can see this conglomeration of things like as well. But this is what I'm so like afraid of. I mean, in addition to absolute fascism and dictatorship and tyranny, I am deeply, deeply afraid of the mass media that will prop it up and will feed off of it at the end of the day. Because like, let's not like mistake like what the stakes are for media outlets right now. A Trump presidency is good for media outlets. It is very good for mass media. It will continue growth. It will continue sensationalism. It is an old, if it bleeds, it leads. And here we can, like extrapolate that to like, if it's like fascism, it will drive like more traffic and things like that. And even though like, I can say so many of the journalists that I've had the honor of working with in mass media and that I know in like mass media now, obviously I'm in independent media now, like they are incredibly great folks. They are incredibly dedicated to the craft and work that they're doing and to 100% accuracy and truth and all of that. But we cannot forget that mass media is a corporate machine that is designed fundamentally to keep itself running as a corporate machine. And the Trump presidency a Trump presidency would be very strong for traffic, and we're going to see just the sensationalism of it like up. And so as that applies to voting rights into stealing the election, on one level it could be good, like in terms of having huge amounts of light shined on like what's happening, but like at that point it's actually kind of like too late, and actually like much too late for any of that to actually be like really effective in terms of like the spotlights that are on it. So I'll shut up now, but like I just like cannot like underscore how good Trump is for mass media traffic. It's unbelievable. There was a report from Advertising Age that I couldn't stop thinking about for years after the first election, because it's absolutely mind-boggling how much traffic did, and I did look a lot at like CNN about it too, and it's just, I mean, it's wild. It's wild.
Well, because they don't talk about him. They don't talk about the issues. They talk about him. And so what I've tried to do on this show is talk about the issues. You want me to talk about the Republicans and Trump? I'm like, honey, this is so beyond that. This is about where we're going. This is about war and peace, really. And I'm sending much love to Abraham up in Venezuela. We are sending you so much love and praying for our brothers and sisters in Venezuela. You will be triumphant. You know the struggle continues, and victory is certain if you continue with the struggle. Praying for you, pulling for you, because that is not our oil up underneath your feet. And some of us know this. Some of us know this. I'm going to get closing thoughts from everybody. Ooh, Terry O'Neill, I wish you could be with us this weekend, but you are with us in spirit. She's here every year, but we want you to get your health together, because that's what's important, because we've got September, we've got October, we've got November, Ariel. we got a lot of stuff to do, and not a whole lot of time in which we need to do these things. I'm going to give everybody less than a minute. So I need to be out of here within 5 minutes, but I want to get some closing thoughts from you in about 30 seconds. We can fudge a bit, Ariel Gold. But you got to unmute. You guys, y'all kill me. It's all right. Well, okay. Well, while you find that, Josh, your closing thought. She's going to find she's going to unmute.
Again, staying hopeful as I start to choke. Staying hopeful. I will not be able to be in Chicago with all of you physically, but I shall be there in spirit.
Yes.
I saw in the chat that there's some talk about some soup. I'm interested to see how that turns out. I'm sure you're setting expectations low there, Ari, and you're, in actuality, it's probably delicious. So let me know how that. In terms of world politics, let me know also how the soup turns out. I want to follow up on.
Don't worry. Wait a minute. I might help him out and bring some, because I make great chicken soup.
Oh, really? All right. Well,
yes, I do. I really do. Yeah. Right. Even my nieces and nephews want it, which is, they're notoriously finicky. I make great chicken soup. And chili.
Well, in terms of the chicken soup being from my heritage, I'm going to have to test that to validate at some point.
I promise you.
All right.
You're going to love it.
All right. Right, you're on.
I put a little black spice on it. You go. Okay. Love it. Ariel, 30 seconds for you.
Well, we can talk chicken soup, because in the last years of my grandmother, Bubby, in Jewish life, I would cook her. Chicken soup was what she wanted to eat. And so I would cook her about once a month, break down 3 whole chickens. So we're going to have to compare recipes. It was like a whole thing during COVID, and then I would deliver it. Half will go in the freezer. And we're going to have to compare recipes.
Yes, that's what I do.
So I want to go on the hopeful. I want to go on both the hopeful, but we can't hope without action, because yesterday the Biden administration just authorized another massive sale of weapons to Israel. And if my first thought that came to my head is he trying to have Kamala lose this election? Because you can't push for a ceasefire while supplying weapons. It just doesn't work that way. It's like telling somebody not to drive drunk while handing them the keys to their car. So,
$20 billion. I was like, are you for real?
At this moment where we need Israel to agree to this ceasefire proposal that came forth in May and Hamas has agreed to. So hope with action, and see many of you, Josh in spirit, over chicken and other soup in Chicago.
Oh, we're going to have a great time. We are going to have a great time. Oh, yes, we are. And Attorney Mark Fancher, your thought, you always just really take us right back to, as we look at politics, you take us back to the Lord. And I thank you for that.
Yeah, let's go there again, because I think that winning the election is of secondary importance. I think winning the minds, the thinking, and the hearts and the souls of people is of primary importance. The election will fall into place if you can capture those things. And I think we lose sight of it. And so I think if we, default to godly principles, a commitment to achieving them, making them real, I think the other things will take care of themselves. Final advice to Josh, I would tread carefully in terms of Santita's soup. She frequently makes reference to lox and ham hocks, and if they find their way into the soup, you might have a problem.
Respectfully, Mark, you just said the most profound thing about hearts and minds, and then everything will follow. But then we had to come with the chicken soup and ham. Anyway,
I'm not going to.
I'm just looking out for you.
He thinks I'm putting a ham bone in there. I am not going to do that. I'm not going to disrespect, even though I have some Jewish friends who are not kosher. But I'm going to leave them out of this chat for the moment. To make me go, did you just eat that? Are you serious? Oh, Ari, why don't you close this out? In These Times magazine, and everybody ranks. This is the kind of fun that we're going to have at our convention. The 15th through the 18th is going to be great. And of course, the 19th through the 20th, the Democratic Convention. But all of the people who are going to be in Chicago, we need to have some conversations, Ari. And that's why you're going to be with us at the convention. And Greg Palast will be there showing his movie on Saturday afternoon. My mother's getting popcorn and such for everybody. And Ariel, I just hope you all pay attention to the movie and not just eat the popcorn or whatever else other food my mother comes up with. That's what she's doing. Ari, your closing thought.
Well, first of all, thanks so much, Santita, for the show, and great to be on with you all. I always just learn so much on the show, and just really appreciate being on so much. Mark, I really appreciated a lot of your comments, and particularly thinking about alienation in this moment and love. Ariel also around those things too. And maybe this is a little too personal because I'm a little tired this morning, but I'm recognizing in myself this real combination that I wonder if it resonates with a lot of other folks right now, which is these really conflicting emotions between real hate, anger, disgust, upsetness, and still trying to think towards the future, trying to be hopeful, and trying to remember love in this moment and about the bonds that are built. And we go through this cycle a lot during elections. We're leading, up to elections. Oftentimes we're what would be really nice if a couple decades ago we had actually started doing some of the deep canvassing that we're talking about, right? And it's almost like clockwork. Every election, it's as soon as things happen, either people win, they don't win. It's it would be good if humans actually connected with each other, and actually spoke, and that narrative that an anecdote you about with the Reverend around it, and Mark with Dr. King as well. And so that's something that I'm going to carry with me from this conversation and moving forward, is to rededicate myself to what love, connection, and hope can look like in such a moment of despair right now. And I think honestly, some of the places that I'll look for further inspiration are some of the folks in Gaza, and the poets, writers, artists, and residents of Gaza who have remarkably, and against all odds, held on to real hope, love, and humanity amidst genocide right now, and including to resistance to, and it also makes me think of this poem from Nikki Giovanni that she wrote about. Yeah, sorry.
Hold that thought, because I got to close out.
Oh, yeah. Go,
No, don't apologize, because really this is about the beloved community, and we're not going to shoot our way into that. We're going to pray our way into it and have loving thoughts. I love you, everybody. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show.